They built a city where a city should not exist, in the middle of a lake, on unstable ground, surrounded by water and enemies. Stone causeways cut across the surface like deliberate scars. Canals turned water into streets. Chinampas turned mud into harvest. This was Tenochtitlan, not a temporary settlement, not a fragile experiment, a capital. At its height, it may have rivaled the largest cities in Europe. Hundreds of thousands lived there. Markets stretched for blocks. Goods arrived from across Mesoamerica: gold, cacao, cotton, obsidian, feathers bright as fire. The Mexica had not always been powerful. They were once outsiders, migrants, unwanted. They arrived at the basin of Mexico late, forced to settle where others would not. A swamp island. But weakness can become innovation. They studied the lake, they shaped it, they mastered it. Chinampas fed the city year-round. Food meant stability. Stability meant soldiers, and soldiers meant expansion. Through alliances and war, Tenochtitlan rose. City-states submitted. Tribute began to flow. The empire did not conquer to destroy. It conquered to control. Defeated cities kept their rulers, but paid heavily. Gold moved, textiles moved, captives moved, and fear moved with them. At the center stood the temple. The Templo Mayor rose above the skyline, a symbol of divine order. Because this empire believed something fundamental. The world was not permanent. The sun did not rise by default. It rose because it was sustained. Sacrifice was not spectacle. It was cosmology. War captives were offered at temple heights to maintain balance. It is uncomfortable to modernize, but to them it was necessary. And for generations the system worked. The market of Tlatelolco pulsed with discipline. Traders followed rules. Judges enforced fairness. The state monitored everything. This was not chaos, it was organization. At the top of this structure stood Moctezuma II, measured, observant, reserved. He ruled an empire at its peak. Then the horizon changed. Ships appeared along the coast. Strange sails, unknown metal, animals no one had seen before, horses, steel that did not shatter against obsidian. At their head was Hernán Cortes, not an emperor, not a vast army, 600 men. But ambition alters probability. They did not charge immediately. They negotiated. Gifts were exchanged. Gold was displayed, and gold has gravity. Moctezuma hesitated. Was this prophecy fulfilled? Was this destiny walking ashore? That hesitation opened space. Cortes did not plan to defeat the empire alone. He searched for resentment, and he found it. Tlaxcala, longtime enemies of the Mexica, joined him. Now the conflict was no longer foreign versus empire. It became fracture within. With thousands of indigenous allies at his side, Cortes marched toward the lake. They entered Tenochtitlan peacefully. Horses crossed stone causeways. Citizens watched from rooftops. The emperor welcomed them. History rarely offers clearer turning points. Inside the palace, the shift was quiet. Moctezuma was no longer fully sovereign. He remained emperor in name. But steel stood behind every decision. The city sensed humiliation. Tension thickened. Then violence erupted. The uprising was brutal. The streets became battlegrounds. The Spaniards fled in darkness. La Noche Triste. Rain fell. Armor dragged men into the water. Many drowned beneath the weight of stolen gold. It should have ended there. The invaders nearly destroyed. But another force had already arrived. Smallpox. Invisible. Relentless. It tore through neighborhoods. Leaders fell. Warriors weakened. Families shattered. No immunity. No precedent. Moctezuma was dead. Whether struck by his own people or killed by the Spaniards, history remains divided. What is certain is this: the center did not hold, and Cortes returned, not as a guest, as a strategist. He regrouped. He rebuilt alliances. He prepared a siege. The final phase had begun. Tenochtitlan's greatest strength had always been the lake. Water protected it from invasion. Causeways controlled access. Canals allowed movement without roads. The city had been designed for defense. But Cortes adapted. He studied the terrain. He listened to his allies. And he changed the rules. Brigantines were built piece by piece, carried over land, assembled beside the water. When they launched, the balance shifted. For the first time, the Mexica were no longer masters of the lake. The blockade began. Supply lines were severed, causeways attacked, fresh water restricted, fishing routes cut off. The city began to shrink inward. Food dwindled. Hunger does not strike like a sword, it erodes. First the markets thin, then the storage empties, then the bodies weaken. The city did not surrender immediately. It resisted, street by street, canal by canal, rooftop by rooftop. Maquahuitl blades struck steel armor. Obsidian cut flesh, but not certainty. Spanish artillery shattered walls that had never faced cannon fire. Allied Tlaxcalan warriors flooded districts once feared. Smoke hung over the lake for weeks. The fighting stretched on for months. The city starved while still defending itself. Leadership passed to Cuauhtemoc. Young, determined, facing inevitability. He inherited collapse, not triumph. He commanded warriors who had lost families to disease. He defended a capital already breaking from within. Yet resistance continued. The final defense was not glorious. It was desperate. Homes became fortresses. Temples became last positions. Canals filled with debris and bodies. Still, the city fought. On August 13th, 1521, Cuauhtemoc was captured while attempting escape across the lake. He did not beg. He did not flee alone. He stood as the last emperor of a dying world. With him, imperial authority ended. Silence followed. Not celebration, exhaustion. The sound of battle faded into the sound of dismantling. Temples were torn down deliberately, stone by stone. The Templo Mayor was reduced to foundation. Blocks from sacred pyramids were reused to construct colonial churches and government buildings. Mexico City rose directly over Tenochtitlan, a physical rewriting of history, a new capital layered over the old one. But physical destruction was only one layer. Codices were burned, records of dynasties vanished in smoke, myths, calendars, astronomical knowledge lost, gods were outlawed, rituals forbidden, conversion replaced cosmology. Yet erasure was incomplete. Language survived. Nahua words persist in modern Spanish. Place names remain unchanged. Cultural memory endured in families who adapted without forgetting. Modern Mexico still stands on Aztec foundations, literally and symbolically. Archaeological remains sit beneath modern streets. Ruins appear during subway construction. The past refuses to disappear. The empire had lasted generations. Its fall took barely 2 years. Not because it lacked discipline, not because it lacked courage, not because it lacked complexity, but because the world had changed. Steel offered durability in combat. Disease devastated without intention. Alliances fractured internal unity. And isolation, once protection, became vulnerability. The Atlantic was no longer a barrier. It was a bridge. Global contact had begun. The fall of Tenochtitlan was not a medieval battle. It was the collision of continents. Empires rise through adaptation. They fall when adaptation fails. Yet they are never entirely erased. Symbols persist. The eagle and serpent endure on the Mexican flag. Cultural patterns endure in art and language. The lake is gone, but memory is not. Tenochtitlan once ruled the basin. Today, its echoes shape identity. History is not a straight line of winners and losers. It is a sequence of transformations. And the Aztec Empire was not the last to face steel and disease. High in the Andes, another empire watched events unfold. Another capital, another ruler, another moment of hesitation. The story was not over. It had only shifted south.